That's the complete system, why it works at the level of the plant's own biology, what materials you actually need, how to prepare seed potatoes so they don't rot before they even sprout, the exact planting process, the healing technique that does the real heavy lifting, the ongoing care that keeps everything on track, and how to harvest, cure, and store the results so they last through winter. It's proven, it's practical, and it turns 2 square feet of unused space into real food security, 20 to 30 pounds of potatoes from a single $10 basket. Get a basket this week. Order your seed potatoes now, so they're ready in time to cure properly. Gather your soil, plant according to your local frost dates, heal religiously every time the plant earns it, and in roughly 90 days, tape that basket over and see exactly what 2 square feet of dedicated effort can produce. A handful of problems show up again and again with this method, and each one has a clear, fixable cause. Tall plants, but few potatoes. This almost always points to too much nitrogen relative to healing. Heavy nitrogen pushes the plant into producing lush foliage at the expense of tuber development. Cut back on nitrogen, make sure you're healing on schedule every time the plant reaches 6 to 8 inches, and confirm the basket is actually getting enough direct sun. Green potatoes at harvest. Green skin means the potato was exposed to light at some point and has started producing solanine, a toxic compound. These need to be discarded, not eaten. The fix going forward is healing high enough and consistently enough that no tubers end up sitting near the surface. Small potatoes overall. Usually a sign of stress, most often from inconsistent watering or insufficient nutrients during the growing season. Maintaining even soil moisture and fertilizing at every healing addresses this directly. Rotting potatoes. Almost always overwatering or poor drainage. Double check that your basket's drainage holes are actually clear and unobstructed, and only water once the top 2 inches of soil have dried out. Hollow centers or oddly shaped tubers. This points back to fluctuating moisture rather than a nutrient or light issue, the same inconsistency that causes cracking and scab. Smoothing out your watering schedule, even if it means watering slightly more often in hot weather, generally resolves it within the next healing cycle. To get the most out of a single basket, start with quality, properly cured set potatoes, choose the sunniest spot available, heal consistently and on time rather than whenever it's convenient, keep moisture even rather than letting it swing between extremes, fertilize at each healing, and give the plant the entire growing season it needs to mature fully before disturbing it. Don't skip curing. It's the difference between potatoes that last a few weeks and potatoes that last several months. Lay the harvested potatoes in a single layer somewhere dark, cool, and humid, with good air circulation. Ideal conditions are 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit with 85 to 95% humidity. A basement, garage, or shaded outdoor spot usually works fine. Leave them for 10 to 14 days. During this window, small cuts or bruises heal over and the skins finish hardening. Check on them periodically and pull out anything showing signs of rot. One bad potato left in the batch can spread that rot to its neighbors surprisingly fast. After curing, brush off any remaining dry soil and move the potatoes to their final storage spot. The best long-term conditions are 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, kept dark. A root cellar is ideal, but a cool closet, a shaded basement corner, or even a refrigerator's crisper drawer all work. Avoid plastic bags entirely, they trap moisture against the skin. Breathable containers, cardboard boxes, mesh bags, or wooden crates with airflow are what you want instead. Stored properly, potatoes grown this way will keep for 4 to 6 months, easily carrying you through winter and into early spring. Check on them roughly once a month and remove anything that starts sprouting or softening before it spreads to the rest of the batch. This is the payoff, and it's genuinely satisfying the first time you do it. Stop watering about a week before harvest, so the soil is dry and crumbly rather than wet and muddy, Wet soil clings to the tubers and makes everything messier than it needs to be. Pick a dry day if your schedule allows it. Then simply tip the basket over onto a tub or directly onto grass. The entire contents tumble out at once: soil, roots, and potatoes together. Gently break apart the soil, and you'll find potatoes distributed through the entire depth of the basket, top to bottom, rather than clustered in one layer the way they would be in a traditional row. That difference is the visible proof that the healing technique worked exactly as intended. Instead of one layer of tubers, you've effectively built several layers stacked inside 18 to 24 inches of soil. Brush off excess soil from each potato, but don't wash them yet. Washing strips away the protective soil layer and introduces moisture that can cause rot once they're in storage. That step comes later, right before cooking, not now. Inspect every potato. Anything with cuts, bruises, or visible damage should be set aside for use within the next week or two rather than long-term storage. The undamaged ones go into curing, and if you want, you can sort them by size at this stage: small ones for roasting whole, medium for general cooking, large for baking. Once everything's collected, the leftover soil doesn't have to go to waste. You can reuse it for other plantings after mixing in fresh compost, or let it rest for a season before using it for potatoes again. The basket itself just needs a rinse and a chance to dry before storing it for next year, or, depending on your climate, you might be able to plant it again right away. Some regions support 2 potato crops a year, one in spring and a second in fall. Around 60 to 70 days after planting, the plant flowers: white, pink, purple, or lavender depending on variety. Flowering is a signal that tubers are actively forming underground, but it isn't a harvest signal on its own, beyond grabbing a few small new potatoes if you want them early. For full-size storage potatoes, the real cue is the foliage starting to yellow and die back naturally, which typically happens 90 to 110 days after planting depending on variety. As the foliage yellows, the plant is redirecting essentially all its remaining energy into the tubers, and the skins are thickening at the same time, and thick skin is the single biggest factor in how long the potatoes will keep in storage afterward. Once the foliage is roughly 75% yellow and starting to wilt, stop watering and let the soil dry out for about a week. This further toughens the skins and makes the eventual harvest noticeably cleaner. Some varieties die back completely, turning brown and collapsing; others stay partially green even when they're ready. Either way, significant yellowing combined with a clear slowdown in growth is the signal to move forward. For the best possible storage potatoes, it's worth waiting until the foliage has been completely dead for about 2 weeks before harvesting. The extra patience maximizes skin hardening. In the meantime, the potatoes can simply sit in the dry soil inside the basket for several weeks without any issue. At that point, they are essentially already in storage. Between healings, the job is straightforward: water and monitor. Watering is the main task. Stick a finger about 2 inches into the soil. If it feels dry, water deeply until it drains from the bottom. If it's still moist, wait. Containers dry out faster than ground soil, especially in hot or windy conditions, so depending on the weather you might be watering daily during peak summer, or only every 3 to 4 days in cooler stretches. Consistency matters more than any fixed schedule. Fluctuating moisture, wet, then dry, then wet again, is what causes problems like hollow heart, cracking, and scab inside the tubers. A reliable technique is to water slowly until you see it draining from the bottom holes, then stop. That ensures the entire root zone actually gets moistened rather than just the top inch. Early morning watering tends to work best, since it gives the foliage time to dry off during the day, which lowers disease risk. Fertilizing mainly happens during healing, but if plants show yellowing or noticeably slow growth between healings, a diluted liquid fertilizer or compost tea, watered in according to label instructions, gives them a quick boost. Yellowing lower leaves combined with otherwise healthy new growth usually points to a simple nitrogen dip rather than anything more serious. Pest pressure in containers is generally lower than in ground beds, but it isn't zero. Watch for Colorado potato beetles, orange and black striped insects that can strip foliage fast if left unchecked. Check plants every few days. If you spot beetles or their orange egg clusters on leaf undersides, remove them by hand and destroy them. For persistent infestations, organic neem oil or spinosad spray works well without harming the rest of the garden. Aphids can also show up, usually clustering on new growth near the top of the plant. A strong spray of water knocks most of them off. If they keep coming back, insecticidal soap handles it. Disease is rare in a well-draining container, but if you see yellowing, wilting, or spotting on leaves that doesn't match normal end-of-season dieback, remove the affected foliage immediately rather than letting it sit in the basket and spread. One advantage that's unique to basket growing: around 60 days after planting, you can reach into the soil from the top, feel around gently, and pull out a few small new potatoes without disturbing the rest of the plant. The plant keeps growing and producing while you're already eating fresh potatoes from it, something a traditional row simply doesn't allow without digging up the whole row. This is the single most important part of the entire method, the technique that actually multiplies your yield rather than just supporting the plant. Once the plant reaches 6 to 8 inches above the soil surface, you add more soil, burying most of the stem and leaving only the top 2 to 3 inches of foliage exposed. You're covering roughly 75% of the plant's visible growth. It feels wrong the first time you do it. It genuinely looks like you're burying your plant alive. But this is exactly what triggers new stolons to form along the freshly buried section of stem, and each new stolon is another site where tubers can develop. You haven't slowed the plant down. You've expanded its potato-producing surface area underground, which is the part you never see and the part that actually determines your harvest. Wait for the plant to grow another 6 to 8 inches above the new soil line, then heal again, covering all but that same top 2 to 3 inches. Repeat this every time the plant gains a new 6 to 8 inches of growth. In a standard 18 to 22 inch basket, that usually works out to 3 or 4 healings across the season. Each time you heal, mix in a light application of fertilizer with the new soil. About a quarter cup of balanced organic fertilizer per healing is enough. This feeds the plant right as it's investing energy into a fresh round of tuber development. Keep healing until the soil reaches within about 2 inches of the rim. Don't fill the basket all the way to the top. You need that gap for watering without soil washing over the edge. Once it's full, stop healing and let the plant grow out the rest of the season undisturbed. One detail worth remembering: the first healing matters more than any that come after it. Miss the timing on that one, or do it too late, and you lose a meaningful share of your total potential yield. There simply isn't a way to fully make it up later. Once you see initial shoots, check the basket every 3 to 4 days. That short window of vigilance in the first month is what separates an average harvest from an exceptional one. Now we plant, and the first decision is location, because once this basket is full, it's not going anywhere. A filled 18 to 22 inch basket weighs 60 to 80 pounds. You need a spot that gets at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight a day. More sun translates fairly directly into more potatoes. If you're working with a balcony or patio, position the basket wherever it catches the most light through the day. In hot climates, a spot with strong morning sun and some afternoon shade tends to perform best. Potatoes can tolerate heat, but they produce more reliably in moderate conditions. Start by adding 4 to 6 inches of potting mix to the bottom of the basket as a base layer, and level it out. Place 3 to 4 seed potato pieces on top, spaced evenly around the basket rather than clustered in the center. Each piece needs room to develop without competing directly with its neighbors. Cover the pieces with another 3 to 4 inches of soil, so they end up buried about 4 inches deep in total. Water thoroughly. until water runs out through the bottom holes. This first watering does two jobs at once. It activates the ice, signaling the potato to start growing, and it settles the soil, eliminating air pockets that would otherwise leave roots without proper contact. Move the basket to its final spot, mark the planting date somewhere you won't forget it, and wait. Depending on soil temperature and variety, green shoots typically appear in 7 to 14 days. That date matters. It's your reference point for every healing that follows. Here's where most people lose 30 to 50% of their seed potatoes before the plant even breaks the surface, and most never figure out why. About 2 weeks before your planting date, which is typically 2 to 4 weeks before your last spring frost, take out your seed potatoes and inspect them. Pieces about the size of a golf ball or a chicken egg can go in whole. Anything larger needs to be cut into pieces, and each piece needs at least 2 or 3 eyes, those small dimples or sprouts where new growth will emerge. Use a cleaned, sharp knife, and make sure each cut piece weighs at least 2 ounces. Too small, and the piece simply won't have enough stored energy to establish strong early growth. After cutting comes the step that gets skipped constantly: curing. Lay the pieces in a single layer somewhere cool, dry, and dark, with good air circulation, and leave them for 24 to 48 hours. During that window, the cut surface dries out and forms a protective callus. That callus is the entire point. It's what stands between your seed potato and the fungal organisms living in your soil. Skip curing, and that raw, moist cut surface becomes an open door. Within 2 weeks of planting, growers who skip this step are often left wondering why a third of their seed potatoes simply rotted underground instead of sprouting. If your potatoes start sprouting during the curing window, that's completely normal. Some experienced growers do this deliberately, a practice called cheating, by placing the pieces in indirect light for a week or two before planting to give them a head start. Sprouts an inch or 2 long are ideal at planting time. If they grow past 3 inches, gently snap off all but the 2 or 3 strongest sprouts per piece. That concentrates the plant's stored energy into fewer, stronger stems instead of spreading it thin across a dozen weak ones. Getting this right starts with 5 materials, and getting any one of them wrong quietly caps how much food you get out at the end. The basket itself. You want plastic, at least 18 inches tall, with holes on both the sides and the bottom, never a solid container. Taller is generally better, since it gives you more room to heal. Most standard laundry baskets run 18 to 22 inches, which lands right in the sweet spot. Expect to pay $8 to $15 at a big box store. Skip the flimsy dollar store versions. Once that basket is full of wet soil, it's carrying 60 to 80 pounds, and a cheap one will crack or buckle under that weight by mid-season. Seed potatoes, and this is where people trip up constantly. Grocery store potatoes are deliberately treated with sprout inhibitors so they sit on shelves longer without growing ice. Planting them is a near guarantee of poor germination. You need certified seed potatoes, which are grown specifically for planting and are certified disease-free. 5 pounds typically runs $12 to $18 and is enough to fill 3 to 4 baskets. For a single basket aimed at maximum yield within 1 season, look for early to mid-season varieties that mature in 70 to 90 days. Yukon Gold, Red Pontiac, and Kennebec are all dependable choices, high-yielding, forgiving of minor mistakes, and they store well afterward. If you're in a shorter growing season climate, early varieties like Nolan or Caribe will mature faster, though usually with a slightly smaller total yield per plant. Soil, and specifically not garden soil. You need roughly 2.5 to 3 cubic feet of quality potting mix per basket, which works out to about 2 large bags. Garden soil or topsoil straight from the ground is too dense. It compacts inside a container, squeezes out air pockets, and suffocates the developing roots. An actual potting mix stays light, drains freely, and contains aeration materials like perlite or vermiculite that keep oxygen available to the roots all season. If you want to build a premium blend yourself, equal parts peat moss or coconut coir, compost, and perlite gives you ideal drainage, nutrition, and structure in one mix. Fertilizer. Potatoes are heavy feeders with changing needs across the season. Early on, they need nitrogen to build strong foliage. As tubers start forming, the priority shifts to phosphorus and potassium. A balanced organic fertilizer, something in the range of 5-5-5 or 10-10-10, covers both stages reasonably well. Compost, worm castings, or slow-release organic granules all work too. You apply this at planting, and again at every hilling. Optional, landscape fabric or burlap to line the basket, which can help if you're worried about fine soil washing out through the holes during heavy watering. Most basket holes are small enough that this isn't strictly necessary, it's a personal preference rather than a requirement. And finally, reliable water access. Containers dry out noticeably faster than ground soil because they have far less total volume and more exposed surface area relative to that volume. If your basket sits somewhere without easy hose or watering can access, factor that into your planning before you commit to a location. A standard laundry basket isn't just a convenient container, it actually outperforms open soil in several measurable ways. The holes along the sides allow air to reach the roots as they grow, a process called air pruning. Instead of roots circling endlessly the way they do in solid pots, air pruning forces the plant to grow a denser, more fibrous root system that's more efficient at pulling water and nutrients. Drainage is close to perfect in a basket, and that matters more than most people realize. Waterlogged soil is one of the leading causes of tuber rot, and unlike a garden bed with unpredictable drainage, a basket with open holes simply can't hold standing water for long. Dark plastic also absorbs heat, warming the soil faster in early spring. That means you can plant earlier than ground growers in the same climate, and the plant grows faster once it's in. Temperature control goes further than just an early start. Potatoes form tubers best when soil sits between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Push much past 80, and tuber formation slows or stops, the plant focuses on foliage instead. A basket gives you options ground planting never will. You can move it into shade during the heat wave, relocate it to catch more morning sun in a cooler climate, or insulate it with a wrap of burlap if you're trying to push the season later into fall. The elevated position also makes daily monitoring easier. You're not bending over a row, you're checking a basket at counter height, which sounds minor until you're doing it every few days for 3 months. Put all of this together, and a single, well-managed basket can produce 20 to 30 pounds of potatoes, somewhere around 15,000 calories of food, from a footprint barely bigger than a doormat. That's real, storable nutrition from a space most people would otherwise leave empty. Potatoes don't grow from roots. They grow from underground stems called stolons. Along these stolons, the plant forms tubers, what we actually call potatoes. The more stolon length you have buried in soil, the more surface area exists for tubers to develop. That single fact is the entire secret behind this method. Traditional row planting buries the stem once, sometimes twice, when you heal the soil up around it mid-season. That typically gives you 12 to 18 inches of buried stem over the whole growing season. A laundry basket that's 18 to 24 inches tall lets you add soil progressively as the plant grows, burying the stem again and again. This is called continuous healing, and it can give you 24 to 30 inches of buried stem, sometimes more, depending on how tall your basket is and how disciplined you are about the schedule. More buried stem means more stolons. More stolons means more tubers. It isn't a trick or a hack, it's simple physics applied to a part of the plant most gardeners never think about. This isn't theory. It's the exact method behind restaurant-quality potato harvests grown in spaces as small as 2 feet by 2 feet. It solves nearly every problem that makes potato growing frustrating: the digging, the wasted space, the rot from bad drainage, the backbreaking harvest at the end of the season. And it works whether you have a quarter-acre backyard or a 4th-floor balcony with one patch of sun. Here's why it works, and why almost no one does it the right way. A $10 laundry basket. 20 pounds of potatoes. 90 days. While most gardeners are still digging trenches and breaking their backs in traditional rows, there's a method that produces more food, in less space, with less effort, and almost nobody is using it correctly. No garden. No tilling. No fancy equipment. Just a plastic basket and one technique most people have never heard explained properly. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to use it, every step, start to finish, including the mistakes that quietly cut most people's harvest in half.